Back again. Hey, guys. This is Thomas Lang.
Trevor Lawrence Jr.
And we are
TL squared. Yes, sir.
Yes. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about auditioning and how to deal with rejection in this business and how to, overcome the moments of frustration when not getting a gig and the competition issues in getting gigs, etc. So, Trevor.
Yes, sir.
How often did you have to actually audition for a gig?
Well, coming up, I have some fond memories. I mean, in the beginning stages, earlier, obviously, I did a lot more auditions than I do now. But, it was L.A., so there was always something big happening. And one in particular, this is my best lesson of auditions, which was 19. Well, I was 19. I can't remember what year that was. It was probably 93. I was 19. They had a huge cattle call for En Vogue.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And I mean, dude, I knew people. They invited me. You should come play, man. Come play. I was like, okay. So as I'm walking to the place, it's like I'm seeing Modern Drummer in real life. Like everybody I've seen is walking with their stick bag too. Like I'm like, wait, I'm playing and the greats are coming in here. So I played and it was killing, and everybody's doing the LA thing. We're like, yeah, man, it's killing, blah, blah, blah. And then so I'm just sitting by the phone like I'm so like, oh, I'm waiting. This is the chance. This is the shot.
Right.
And long story short, it never happened. And they kept the same band.
Oh, wow.
So that was my introduction into the business of auditions.
Right.
So later on in LA, there was a run. I ain't going to say anybody's name, but there was a run of a person that was getting hired to have cattle calls, but they already would just keep the band.
Right.
So it was just about the money, getting all the contacts and all that, and looking like a thing, but you were never getting the gig.
So the point was for the agent really to make money, and he split it with the MD or
whoever, however
something,
the business was,
Right.
And then, it also, this is before social media, so it gave you a chance to get contact information and levels of playing, and you can, because that's something that's worth something when you start putting bands together. And then I noticed this person went on to put bands together.
So it's a bit of market research.
Yeah, and then they ended up being banned from all the places because they weren't even paying the spaces.
Oh, really?
So it all worked out. But I learned a lot about auditioning, and I kind of made it a thing where I just didn't audition after that.
Right.
I just kind of stopped early on because my thing was, it does take a lot of time, and the emotional roller coaster. I'm not.
Right.
It's like I said, well, let me just put a body of work together and start working, so that way it's like you calling me for me.
Right.
And that's what I ended up doing, to where I don't really audition. You know what I'm saying? I'll get together.
When was the last time you auditioned?
Probably, as far as an audition, it was back in those early days. I literally stopped. I mean, now there's probably what I thought was first rehearsal, and maybe it was some kind of feel out, and I just wasn't aware.
Right.
But most of the time it's like we've already made the plans and everything, and I'm just coming down there to gel and vibe.
Right.
So usually, you know what I mean? But as far as like an audition, it's been years, man, because I just decided not to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
I just decided to call me
exactly
for me,
So do you think that at one point in your career, once you're a little bit established, people know your name, you have, produced a, decent amount of work, and you have a track record and everything, do you think at one point it becomes unnecessary to audition, or even would be detrimental to your status if you did audition?
I think, as you know, when you get into these higher rooms and these higher echelons of gigs and musicians, they just call it something different.
Right.
They just say, yeah,
just
you come down and play.
Jam.
Yeah, come down and play, you know. And I think at that point, it's not really about your playing aptitude. It's about how you going to gel with the rest of the people and, and the artists. And sometimes, because you could be great in something they've heard or whatever, but it might not work live. You might not have the stamina, So it's important, but they frame it differently. You know what I'm saying? Like, they'll be like, hey, we want you to come do this, but can you come down and just hang and vibe with us?
But that, I guess that would be an audition, but I don't see. For me, an audition is really a very specific thing, like a cattle call type scenario.
Right. That's true.
Where it's publicly posted or somehow advertised, and people show up, or there's an agent involved and he calls a bunch of people.
Right.
I'm talking about those kind of scenarios because I haven't done anything like that in probably 10 years or so.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the last thing, and I very famously auditioned for Dream Theater.
Oh.
I don't know if you know.
I didn't know that.
In like when was
When they
it?
switched to Mike Mangini in that time.
Yes, exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
After Mike Portnoy left,
Yeah.
they reached out to a bunch of drummers they
Right.
thought would fit the, musical
Yeah.
arena somewhat, and invited Virgil Donati was there, and Achilles Priester, and Derek Roddy, and Peter Wildor from Sweden, and who else was there? Mike Mangini, Marco Miniman. So that kind of prog metal, whatever drummers, and it was interesting because, I mean, I'd done many auditions before that. Often not really huge cattle call auditions, but auditions where there's a fair amount of people involved. But usually they were kind of pre-selected. Where the band or the management would call like 20 people they thought would be great for the gig.
Yeah.
Not like everybody.
Well, of course, of
But-
course.
And usually they would call people who already had a name.
Sure.
Because they needed that for the prestige of the band, and and they wanted somebody with experience and all that. So it was an interesting thing, and that was very public, that audition. I mean, in the beginning, everybody was told this is super confidential and private,
Sure.
and but then in the end, they did film everything and release it all.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's right. I do remember that kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it was a weird thing because you don't often end up in a audition center, which is already stressful enough.
Right.
But then knowing that this could or will be released,
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was a weird scenario. And then,
Wow.
the thing is, and that's why, the topic of the conversation today is about, dealing with rejection. I never felt that the gig was right for me anyway.
Right.
And not because I don't think I could have done it well. I think I
Right.
nailed it.
Right.
And it's totally right up my alley, and everything was fine.
Right.
But I think there were other issues that didn't really relate to the playing only, that needed to be sorted out business-wise, and everything that didn't work for either party.
Right.
But it was, for me, shortly after it was released, I ended up being one of the guys who didn't get the gig. 'Cause
Right.
Mangini got the gig.
Right.
And people went like, "Oh, you must feel terrible," and it's so embarrassing, and like, I'm not sure. I didn't feel embarrassed at all. I felt really good about it.
Yeah.
And I
as
never
long as you did
felt
what you
that
did. Yeah.
it was sort of an embarrassing moment or anything like that. And in fact, it actually helped with promotion,
Of
and my
course.
name got out to people that didn't know me before, and the first time they saw me was at that audition, which I
Sure.
did, well.
Yeah.
So it was actually, good for promotion. But I still, and this is now, 13 years later, I still hear people talk about that audition.
I'm gonna go look at it now. I gotta go back and look.
and talk about, I still, on every YouTube video, I get comments by people saying, "Oh, he should have gotten the Dream Theater gig."
Right.
Every single, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that an audition that was then publicized and released had so much impact and such a long tail of,
Sure.
comments and memories for people. It's interesting.
It was early though. That was early in the social media day. Like it was before
Yeah, it was
even
2010,
called
I think.
social media. So it was
Right.
still early. And then when it
Yeah.
adapted, it was like that was something for people to talk about.
Yeah.
I remember that period. I didn't remember per se seeing a video of you. I'm gonna go look it up. I did just remember one thing that was kind of like an audition, but it was just, I won't say the guy or the name, but we all know him. He's on our company, and he is accused of trolling people all the time. So he was
Right.
in a little rock group, and when he got kicked out of that, unbeknownst to a lot of people, the bass player called me because of some connections.
Right.
They'd asked me would I like to join the band. I flat out said no because I know this guy.
Right.
So that's the other thing that sometimes people don't talk about is there is such a thing as integrity. You
Right.
can't chase every dollar.
Yeah.
And even though it's not like we're the closest friends, but that's what people that have integrity do. It's like, nah, I
Right.
mean, if it went bad with my guy, I'm not going to just step in like
Right.
everything's cool. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. Everybody would make that decision, but I did. But I have to say, thinking about this conversation, I go through a lot of auditions as a songwriter. and a producer.
You audition.
Now
people.
that's like no, I'm talking about trying to get records on.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
if we're talking about dealing with rejection, I mean, bro.
Oh,
in that world,
same. I mean, I pitch a lot of songs and for trailers and movies or whatever, jingles and in the Composers Club and all that kind of stuff. So it's almost daily.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you're trying to get records on, bro, that for the amount of records that you do, it's it's not even close. I mean, for the things you land, cool, but for the amount of beat, like in hip hop, man, please, for the thousands and tens of thousands of beats you do, I'm lucky to maybe have 100 releases or some small number compared to what you do.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like if you don't know how to take rejection, you would have packed up and went home a long time ago.
Absolutely.
In this business as a whole.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in entertainment, it's the same, I guess, for actors.
Oh, they got it bad. Too,
they
man.
audition all the time, and they interview all the time, and have meetings with casting directors and agents and whatever, and musicians too. I mean, we get rejected all the time,
right?
All the time, and I think it's much more so than in any other profession.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, not even athletes, because what matters there is the result. It's
right.
not necessarily about chemistry and the vibe and hanging and do you have the right look or something. No, I mean, you jump that far or not.
That's after
simple.
the fact.
In any other area of expertise, the only thing that really matters is skill.
Right.
If whether you're an accountant or a lawyer or whatever, it's like you get the job done, great. It doesn't matter what shoes you wear necessarily, but there's so many factors in our business. Like, do you have the right look?
Right.
Do you have the right fashion sense? Do you have a good sort of track record that kind of goes with what we're doing, image wise and credibility wise, and then there's the skill. You have the right gear and instrument and the skill, for playing. And then are you, personally, do you gel with the band and all those kind of things? And that can change really quick too.
Sure.
And can you adapt really quickly to those changes? Like if your artist or the producer, whoever you're working with, decides, okay, now everybody's going to have green hair,
right?
For the next tour, and you're not into it, is that going to work? It's a lot of those kind of things you have to kind of accept and tolerate often.
Yeah.
Or really get on board and sort of make sure that you're truly believing in whatever somebody's throwing your way and changing your attitude completely just to stay on board often.
Right, exactly. And that's real talk, man. I mean, if you can't take rejection. Oh, and here's the thing. And you could agree to this. So out of all the auditions you've done, and me too, when have they ever told you at the audition, we're not going to go with you? They never do. It's always like, oh, you did great. It's great, man. Oh, man, you killed it, especially here in L.A. Right. Oh, man, that was killing. Oh, man, And then it's like, who's the next guy?
I've had, yes, but you know what? It's funny you say that. Never here in L.A.
Right. Oh,
but
wow.
in Europe, all the time. It's like, it's not going to work out.
Oh, yeah.
On the same day.
You're right. I agree with that. It's very straightforward. I can imagine that, right? But here it's so fake most of the time, and there's everybody looking around before they say something because there's so many politics in the room. That's one thing that I think that is important to navigate too. You have to know how to survey and take in the energy of the room.
Yeah, of course.
Wherever you are, because how many times you've seen people walk in the room loud or saying the wrong stuff for this particular situation. Right. It's just the wrong look, and it's just a veteran guy sitting there like, look at this guy playing himself. Like, bro, just shut up.
But I've been to auditions where I was still sitting in the hallway, outside of the rehearsal room.
Yeah.
Just waiting for my turn.
Right.
And somebody like a producer or artist would walk by and go, not going to work. You don't have to wait.
Oh,
it's the
that's
look.
crazy. Bro.
We don't like the hair. We don't.
Oh,
don't even get a chance to play or anything. It's like, no, it's not going to work. Or you're too old.
Oh,
I've had this happen in England several times. You walk in somewhere and people go, "How old are you?"
Well, that happened. Yeah,
and you're like, "I'm 25," and they're like, "Yeah, that's just past what we need."
I mean, there was a big period of that too, because you had these guys that, right when stuff was starting to go in the direction it is now, with these executive kind of musical director people that put bands together,
right?
You started seeing that, everything was about the age and how, because especially with the TV shows, it was all about, they got to look so and so, and exactly. That's a real thing for TV, but it's weird. I mean, that's also the moment. I mean, we started. It hasn't really changed. Like when all these shows started, Idol and all that whole period,
Right.
we kind of started seeing the visualization of music that has now has moved over to social media because
Right.
it's video based, right?
Sure.
And it hasn't really changed. And now the emphasis and we have these conversations about social media people and personalities, the emphasis is on the video, right? So it's definitely, we're seeing music change from an audio only thing to a very heavily, disproportionate audio visual thing.
Even back in the MTV days, if you didn't have a video to your song, chances were you didn't make it to the charts.
True story.
If people can't see you and associate visuals with the music, then it didn't have a chance.
Right. And then that was one of the big controversies too, because Michael and Prince had all these hits and they weren't playing them on MTV. Right. And they finally had to figure that out, and then everything started just branching out. You know what I'm saying? Because it was a rock thing at first. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was, so yeah, man. I mean, Rejection, bro, and all that. I mean, it's as I don't know if you can attest to this, but I mean, it seems like the skin is getting thinner, not thicker these days.
Yeah, and I don't even know how. I don't hear about many auditions here in LA. Do you hear about many?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
I think it's picking people off social media now. I mean,
it's that I think, and also the really great work is very cliquey, and I think people and MDs or producers are cherry picking people they already know and have worked with, or other members of the band have close relationships with. It's very difficult for anybody like completely from outside of that clique to get into that world.
Oh, sure.
Unless there's like a personal introduction and recommendation and all that kind of stuff. I think it's pretty much impossible.
Same with songwriting, man. It's tough. Like, it's tough to get in these rooms and be around the ball game that's really going on. It's not something that's just out there for everybody to get access to. It's interesting to see how this thing is moving, because you're right. I mean, back in the day, it was so simple. It was like, band did a record, the studio guys did the record.
Right.
The touring came, they auditioned the band. If it wasn't a band, they auditioned the band for touring. You knew you were going to go on tour, but you weren't ever going to do the record, so don't ask.
Yeah.
Now it's like, you go make the record, you had a fun time in the studio, let's go on the road. Right. It's all over the place now, man. Yeah.
There's no rules. And also, not only are there very few auditions, and I don't know if it's different in other countries anymore, but in my world and everybody I speak to, people don't get gigs through auditions anymore at all. Right. It's like you say, it's either like, cherry picking people on social media, or at a very, very high level, it's kind of the let's get together, have a dinner, and hang and see if we get along, and then maybe we'll jam. If we get along and we have a great time, we all know you play great.
Right.
Let's just see if we can get along. Let's have dinner and chat, and then if that's all cool and we like each other, then let's go and jam a little bit. It's kind of that thing. But that kind of formal audition thing, I don't know if it exists and will exist in the future.
Yeah, it's different.
It is, like in Hollywood, and all the people in the film industry and actors and stuff, that's still happening.
Sure.
Very much so. A lot of it, though, on video.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in person anymore. It's literally, people get a script and they're at home, they film themselves, they act in front of a camera and do little things, send it in. A lot of that, and it's like that, Chris. I mean, that's and it's
true.
A bit like what we do on social media with drums. It's basically your electronic business card. Is your Instagram or whatever. And you can display whatever you want to display, and you can play different styles and go, hey, do you like what I do? And it's like, what do you do? Like, check out my Instagram. That's what I do.
Right.
It's like that. So I don't think it'll become necessary in the future to have auditions like that, because everybody's social media is their own audition performance.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, and in that sense, I do like the fact that it's kind of body of work driven a little bit, right? It's just kind of like a little bit more real, because you may have an audition where you just played the best you've ever played, and then you're never that consistent again on the road. Yeah. But, which happens, right? And then vice versa. Somebody that's great that had a bad audition and they didn't get the gig. So I think, the way they're picking people, it's like you're kind of seeing the real. I'm not a fan for the things where you can tell it took you 100 takes
Oh yeah.
to get it, and you're smiling all over the place and all these things, and you finally got it right where you played it right and you're smiling.
Yeah.
I'm not into that. That seems fake to me, right?
Of course.
But, you know, the people that are just killing, you could tell when somebody's
yeah.
killing, man.
Oh, yeah,
You
of
know,
course.
and it's like,
Absolutely.
you don't need a lot of time to
Yeah.
tell that, you know?
And there's plenty of sort of examples for. Just recently, you know, Grayson recruitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just got to get with
Avenged.
suicidal
Suicidal, right. Yeah,
tendencies,
suicidal, yeah.
based on his social media. You know.
Yeah.
Or
Now, he told me he's actually a rock drummer first.
right.
So he came out kind of with the big band thing, but
Yeah.
he's so I think that's in his wheelhouse a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit more
No,
naturally than
absolutely.
everything
Absolutely.
else.
But just mentioning him as an example of, you know, people recruiting or bands recruiting members from social media, or Annika Nilis, you know,
Yeah.
the Jeff Beck gig that came through her.
Oh, I didn't know
Instagram.
she was doing that. Oh, good.
Yeah. She's,
okay, good.
did that for whatever the whole last 2 years or something like that.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he passed.
Yeah, he passed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, he saw on social media, is like, that's great, you know, let's invite Annika, and that was it. He decided. I mean, you know, there's no other
Right.
like
Well, and then
drummers.
also they're bringing something to the table. You know, back in the day, the artist was the thing, right? And you were just a side man. Now some of these side band people might have more followers than the artist. So the artists also know it's lending some energy to what they're doing.
You know what? Speaking of, it was funny. I have a story about that. I was once, you know, recommended to a gig with a big English artist,
Right.
And he knew who I was. He had heard who I was,
Right.
and people knew who I was around him.
Right.
And he literally, and as I walked in, introduced myself, he said to me, "I need bodies on stage, not faces," and sent me off again. I can't mention the name, but he said he wants some anonymous dude behind the drum set. He doesn't care. You know, he doesn't want anybody who could be competition or has more social media followers than him or anything like that. It's like, no, I need bodies on stage.
And that happens
faces.
too. That happens in the other types of music. It might not be overt like that, but it is when you're, you know, the MD really is taking the lion's share of the money, and you're kind of like a slave on these gigantic gigs.
Right.
You know, like I made that post where Ricky Lawson said,
oh my God,
you know, he
how
said
great.
he was making $4,000 a week. This is in the 80s, but still $4,000 a week with the Yellow Jackets. But that's a jazz fusion group. But then he started making $30,000 a month. I mean, he was making with the Yellow Jackets $30,000 a month with Michael Jackson during the heyday.
Yeah.
And then
he made 40 with like Lionel. What was the other one?
Lionel, Michael Jackson, and then Backstreet Boys came doing arenas, and it was like, you know, 10, like 2,500 a week or 1,500 a week. Completely just devastated what cats were really worth, and that still lives on today. And it's even worse now because it's becoming the whole show is just about the MD. It's not even about the band anymore. So MD's going to get as many people he can get as cheap as he can, so he can make more money.
Of course,
you know what I'm saying. So it's becoming, and it's very like the MDs are no longer there. Yeah, they're rehearsing people and then sticking somebody out, and they're on to the next one. Exactly. So the artists aren't even getting that integrity and that thing on every show. They're getting what you're paying for the show. I put the show together. The rest is on you.
Exactly. It's a really weird world right now.
Yeah.
Because there is no passion involved, and there's no depth in performing and expressing yourself, and it's really not about music at all. True. In many of these situations, especially in the pop and like bubblegum world. Yeah. You know, I have a very close friend who's renting a studio space for me here, who's out all the time with all these pop bands and everything. Yeah. And I hear these stories, and every time, you know, he's auditioning, and he does a lot of that right now. But those auditions are more like about how much do you charge. It doesn't matter. Do you look good? Right. How much do you cost? Right. That's it. Right. The playing is secondary completely.
Because it's mostly
and also
Pro Tools.
The human element and the chemistry and the gelling with other people, totally secondary. It doesn't matter. Yeah. This is 8 weeks, and you know, you're good. We like the way you look. You fit the age, and your look's great. And what do you charge? And then you give them the wrong number, and they're like, "No, okay, next." Yeah. You know, and it's really it's kind of sad to see that sort of the essence and real substance of what this is about, which
Right.
is playing music and performing and obviously interplay between members and really sort of performing music well, and
Yeah.
supporting an artist becomes so irrelevant,
Well, back in the day, this is another thing that's changed because of probably technology and because of that same sentiment. Back in the day, you went to the concert to be blown away and
Right.
see a higher level. Now we're going to the concert and we're not even getting to where the record was.
Right. Yeah.
It's not even the level of the record.
Yeah.
Because it took so much and so much manufacturing for a lot of these artists to even make the record. When you see them
Right.
live, it's like, bro, this is not even as good as the record.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they try to hypnotize you with $1 million in screens and staging.
Yeah.
But if you go look at an old Earth, Wind and Fire concert or a James Brown,
Right.
it was just unbelievable. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
like, it's just a different day, man. And I think technology, let's talk about that. I mean, the truth is technology has kind of, in the way that everybody feared, it has really done that because it has made artists not have to take drummers all the time
Right.
or bands, right?
Yeah.
And it's also made it where the skill level doesn't have to be as high
Right.
because
Sure.
90% of everything's on Pro Tools already.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like it's kind of low-key done what everybody in the beginning was fighting against. It's
Yeah.
going to replace people, just like every other sector we're seeing. Just like
Right.
AI.
Yeah.
It started, we've kind of have had that, we've been living through that for the last
Right.
20 years, right? Seeing more and more musicians getting replaced,
Of course.
especially horns and guitar players.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, bro, and percussionists.
And
It's
keyboard
like,
players.
yeah, I mean,
who needs a keyboard player anymore?
I know,
Seriously.
that's true, but on stage, at least you'll probably see at least bass, drums, and keys, but
Right.
guitars, percussion, horns, bro, forget
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah.
It's very rare now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So, was there ever a moment in your life where you were rejected or didn't get an audition or were in a scenario that was kind of emotionally challenging and you really suffered from that moment? Was there ever
Yeah.
a time where you were like, damn, that would
Yeah.
have been so great, and am I terrible, and starting self-doubt and all
Absolutely.
that kind of thing?
That
Yeah.
same audition with In Vogue when I was 19. Because remember, I might have had, a stick indoor, something small, but I wasn't there yet. So it was like, this is the key to, at that point,
Right.
you're still in the part of life where you're just trying to get stuff. Like you haven't even had your favorite drum set or,
Right.
for most people, you haven't had the gear, and the money to be able to buy. So
Right.
that at that moment, getting something like that, it's like everything happens.
Huge.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I was so so ready. I was like, oh, I can do this. I can play to the click. I know I can get this gig. I know I killed the audition. I know people there. The only thing that kept me a little sane was that they didn't even get a new band. They kept the same band.
Right,
So
yeah.
I was like, this was a ploy. It was a
Right.
joke.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I was, for those days or weeks, and I don't even think there was a call. So that's the other thing. There was never a call.
Right.
So it was just like, my dad is probably, being a veteran, was probably just letting me live through that. But he
Right.
probably knew, like, bro, it's 4 days.
Right,
They're
yeah.
not going to call, but he didn't say anything.
Yeah.
So every day I'm optimistic, like, it's coming today. And when it didn't come, I was like, you know what? And I called somebody,
Yeah.
and I'm hearing, clack, boom, clack, let me call you
Uh-oh.
back. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Okay.
I didn't get it. So who's playing?
Wow.
Oh, we kept the same band.
Wow.
Oh, man. Come on, bro.
Dang, that's so weird.
It's a Chris dream killer, bro.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
know?
I've had, interesting. I've had situations like that. Obviously, I've gotten, I think, while I was auditioning in the early years, I think probably 50% of the gigs I didn't get.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Or maybe more even.
Right.
And yeah, probably even more. I mean, I didn't audition for everything all the
Right.
time, but at least 50% I wasn't the right, didn't have the right look,
Right,
or did something during the audition they didn't like, or whatever. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
Maybe overplayed a little bit, or
Right.
whatever. Didn't learn that one song they wanted to play, whatever it was.
Right.
And I remember hearing this interview with, I think it was Lady Gaga. This is much later now that I heard this interview, but somebody interviewing her, and she said something like, there's 300 million people who love Lady Gaga in the world, who are big fans all over the world. And there's probably a billion people who hate Lady Gaga,
Right.
you know, and they're totally not into that kind of music and think it's total trash. And I think you have to learn to focus on your fans and the people that do enjoy what you do. And I think that's a good way to deal with rejection. Lady Gaga doesn't focus on the people who don't like her.
Right.
She focuses on her fans, the people who
Right.
support her and are there, you know, buying albums, supporting her, showing up at concerts. That's her audience, and she caters to that audience. And I think that's a great way to sort of get rid of all the noise, you know, and the negative feelings, and you know, when you're being rejected, just focus on the people who do want to work with you, and the moments that do work out forget the rest. It didn't work, it's totally fine, you know, and sort of try to focus on the positive and the people who do want to hire you, do want to work with you, and go down that route.
Yeah,
I think always worked for me, you know.
I think that's also what we're seeing at our age and seeing with this new generation, where they've decided to not even experience the rejection, and they're going to just go on social media and build their own thing and deal with their fan base.
Yeah.
And I think for those of us that have paid those dues, it becomes a little bit off-putting until you get your head around it, because like, man, we had to get rejected and do all this stuff, and now you guys come along and like, we don't even want that. We're just going to go direct to our people, make our money, never go on tour, never write a song, and still live a life, you know, and that's just where things are.
Yeah.
That's a big transition, but that's where it is.
But
you know?
although, I mean, there is a lot of trolling online too, and there's a lot of negative comments, but I guess you can just delete those or filter those. Or
we've
not
seen
allow.
people that have turned them off, actually.
Yes. Oh, a lot.
I
mean,
know
I've seen
some
it
people
more
that
and more,
turn the
actually.
comments off. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I know. But that's the thing. That's the easiest way to deal with rejection. Just completely, you know, blank.
I'm so
talk to the
petty.
hand, you know. I
I'm
don't
so
care if you
petty.
don't- Yeah. And
I'm
maybe
petty,
that's
y'all.
Maybe that's a good way, because there's a lot of, you know, emotional damage that's being done by trolls online to people on social media. I mean, I know from my kids, you know, when they were a little younger, they posted something and they got some bad comments, they were devastated, you know.
I get it a lot, man. Whenever I post something Second Amendment related, look out.
Yeah.
They're gonna go. You know, I told you, I don't know if we talked about it in another show, but you know, I had a guy get on my DMs like, I came for the drums, I left for the guns.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
I said, well, I didn't ask you to come for either one.
Right. Yeah.
Just quickly going back to something you guys mentioned there, it's an interesting thing. So I consider myself to be a bit of a sensitive type person, you know, and things like that. But that plays really well when you're writing music or performing music live with an artist and trying to tune into their sentiment and their feelings and deliver their vision. However, if you're an online personality, being devoid of any of that sensitivity and empathy is a good thing.
Right.
So, you know, like if you're just in business for yourself and things like that, and you'd be like, trolls, I don't care. I've still got another 100,000 guys who subscribe to me every month.
Yeah.
But by the same token, as a performing musician, sideman, artist, it's terrible.
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
Well, I mean, you're right, and you know, and we're seeing the evidence of that. I mean, people. Well, you can call me corny all you want. You know, I'm sitting here smiling and do it, but people love it.
Right.
You know, and
Exactly.
it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, listen, you know, you can if we're doing music, however you're able to be successful and live a life,
Right.
have at it. Because it's all art, and it's just, that's the other thing, it's art. So there are always going to be people that love it and that hate it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, I just went to this Warhol and Basquiat exhibit in Paris, and it's like, you see people walking over, and they're just like scratching their head like, why is this getting so much acclaim? You know, because they're just like, it just looks like scribble. And then you get people that are like, oh my God.
I know.
Oh my God, this is so amazing. You know, so it's like there's always going to be that in art, bro.
In
like,
art, yes. But that's what I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, there's not enough art left, I think, in the music scene or music industry. Because art, you know, there's this very famous quote, let's talk about art, said the fool to the idiot.
Right.
You know, because what are you going to say? It's art.
Right.
It depends on your personal interpretation and how you receive it and what it inspires in you and so on. You can't really quantify it or say this is great art, this is not great art. You know, entirely depends totally on your mood and everything else, you know.
Yeah.
And like you say, some people go, "What the hell is that?" Others go, "Oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever seen."
Yeah.
You know, and but in music, it's different, or in entertainment, in our industry right now, it's not about the art anymore. A lot of times,
right?
You know?
That's true.
And that's because if it was only about the art, anybody could deal with rejection very easily.
Yeah,
I think because it's like that's what I made, that's my art, like it or not. You know,
and they do that in the jazz
does
world.
that. Yeah,
I think in the
do.
jazz world, you see a lot of that mind frame where this is what I do.
Right, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Cats are like, hey, you call me for me,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go try to do that over there,
right.
and you're going to call me for me.
Exactly.
And I respect that part, too.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's a very much more artistic mindset than those of us that also try to go commercial. With commercial, you bring in all the politics and all the other factors. I think the pure jazz people are just pure. That's why when you get smooth jazz, it's kind of like the complete epitome of commercialization, just playing jazz chords at times,
right?
But bringing in every kind of groove from everything else.
Right.
It's like we're just playing jazz a little bit,
right? Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? But everything else is going to be the highest level of produced and sequins coats and loud, guitar colors and all that stuff, and black saxophones and so it's interesting, man. Straight. If I see another straight alto, I'm gonna lose my mind. But no, or curved soprano rather. Right. But it's like, yeah, man. It's just interesting where we are right now,
That's
man.
Funny.
Yeah.
But and in the music industry, in that world of auditioning, I don't think there is much of the art left, to be honest, which is a shame.
Yeah, it's business first, I feel like. Yeah. Especially when it's the label, like the corporate label thing. Right. It's like, bro, I've seen those situations where it's like you go through one set of auditions and then it's like, okay, now so-and-so wants to hear it.
Call
and they're
back?
coming.
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah, call back. And then it's like, oh, now the label people want to come.
Right.
And at any of those levels, like you could have people that say, we love it. Right. And the label's like, doesn't fit what... out of there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like happens all the time, bro.
I remember incidents where I was showcasing for labels and managers and stuff with bands, and which was kind of like an audition, but for the whole band, or for the artists. Right. I remember being like, rehearsing with like new boy bands, and the label wanted to see, or management companies wanted to see, promoters, how they look on stage and if it's all gonna work out or not. And I experienced moments where they just said, "This is gonna work, except for that dude there. We don't want him.
Right.
Get rid of him. If it's only 3 guys, that could work. Or, the guys work. They can sing, they can dance. Change this, change that, and get rid of those 2 guys in the band."
Yeah.
They're like, that's not the look we want.
Yeah.
Really pretty hardcore.
It happens all the time. I remember an artist, I've seen one artist that I could say that I was playing at the showcases and played like at one of the gigs that got her signed. Right. And this is in LA in the early 90s, and that's Macy Gray. And, I saw that it's like you felt it. Right, so in the beginning, if I'm getting the call from who I got the call from, these are still people that are just kind of local people. So at that moment, you could be like, "Hell no, I'm cool," or you say, "Well, I believe in it." You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Let me try to do it. And we would play these shows, and you would see it packed out, and it was such a unique thing. Right. And I just remember the one show where the label came, and they like gave her flowers, "Welcome to so and so label," and I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." And I ended up touring with her a little bit later in the heyday a little bit, and then I wrote some songs with her later on a couple records, and it was like that was my only time seeing something like that work. Right. Because if you remember, that's kind of gone too, because it was showcases. That was another thing that happened all the time. Yeah. We're showcasing. There's a showcase. Come over here to the showcase. Yeah. And we don't hear that much about that anymore either.
Not at all. Yeah. Oh, I remember in the 90s all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Every other artist I worked with, especially younger artists, there was tons of showcase. We would fly to New York from London to showcase for Seymour Stein,
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
like whatever, you know.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
like big, you know, industry insider kind of showcases. It
Yep.
was, you know, and you know, rent SIR or something, and there's a whole big room, and there's like one guy walking in, sitting on the couch while you rehearsed for a week and put a little show on with everything, and the one guy comes in and sits there for 20 minutes and goes, and leaves, you know.
Right. Or you can have the ones that start a bidding war.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I remember there was this place, I don't know if it's there anymore, but it used to be called Sayers Club.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and this is probably about 10 years ago. And I remember this one artist, she would come on the day they had these like industry thing, and she would just destroy it. And I remember one night, every label was there. They were trying to sign this girl. I mean, she destroyed it, right? And I just sat there like, oh, she's about to be a huge star. And then she got signed in kind of obscurity.
Oh, really?
It didn't work.
Okay.
But it was killing, you know, like everybody would come to see her. It was like you're on top of it all. So you never know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We never know. And that's another reason why you have to learn how to accept rejection at all the levels.
And the thing, I mean, I've seen people devastated and fall into like a deep depression from one rejection at an audition. You know, but it happens. I mean, if you're a sensitive person, and it depends very much on how you're being told.
Yeah.
You know, because the tone makes the music. And I mean, I've literally been in the room when people were told, "Yeah, dude, you're just ugly. We don't want you in the band," or like, you know, whatever it is, something personal about them, like. The face and the nose and the hair.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy.
Just does not work for, you know,
Yeah.
to women and to girls and female
terrible.
like band members and stuff.
Terrible.
Or you're too fat, you're too short, you're too tall, you're, you know, don't
Terrible.
have, you know, blonde hair, we need blonde hair, and you, whatever it is, your ass is too big, your fingers are too long, and, you know,
I don't
all
think
that
that's
kind of
ever a problem. But no, you're right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, though.
But, you know, that's
Yeah.
tough. And I know, you know, and I still have friends who've really suffered from this for a long time. And then that has caused all kinds of, like, anxieties going forward, even up to a point where, like, so intimidated by any kind of public scenario or performing and stage fright and all this kind of things as a result from rejection at one audition.
We do actually have a good mutual friend who he auditioned for Motorhead at one point. You know, this guy's like a Steve Vai, Joe Satriani grade guitarist, absolutely wonderful. He's had a good career elsewhere as well. And auditioned for Motorhead, and the answer was two things. Number one, you had your bullet belt, you know, those kind of punk bullet belts. You had it on upside down. If it was real, you would have shot yourself in the head. And then the second point was you don't have enough hair to be in Motorhead.
Right.
And to be fair to Lemmy, he actually wrote the guy a letter and saying, this guy is good enough to be in Motorhead. He just doesn't have hair.
Right.
And that was the thing.
That's now they could just put fibers in or get a transplant. But yeah, I mean, that's, you know, it's such a, that's what I'm saying, is every part of this experience of this business is just, there's a factor of, it's all chance. It's just timing. Every single piece of this thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like amazing. I mean, how about the times when you get called and it's a slow time and then you get called for everything at once?
I know.
It sucks. It's
Speaking of, you know, there was at the time I auditioned for the Dream Theater.
Right.
The same day I got the call to audition for Dream Theater, I got the call to audition for Avenged Sevenfold, which Michael Elizondo was.
Yeah, that's when he was making the records.
Yes,
oh,
exactly.
Wow.
But at the time, Mike Portnoy had left like Dream Theater to go on tour with Avenged Sevenfold, and there were some issues. They, you know, didn't work out for them with him either. So they needed a drummer, and Dream Theater needed a drummer, and I got the call on the same day from both bands. And I met with Mike and Greg Bisson at Greg's house here. You know, Greg's my neighbor.
Yeah.
And Greg called me up and said, "Hey, you know, there's a friend of mine, producer here. He's looking for a drummer for Avenged Sevenfold. Do you mind coming over?" So we met in the kitchen at Greg's house.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any playing, but it was just like a meeting with Mike.
Yeah.
You know, your good buddy.
Yeah, one of my
who
best
used to
friends.
live here, and just kind of face to face, you know. And the same day, just before that, I got the call to audition for Dream Theater. 2 gigs that Mike was doing at the time, basically.
That's crazy.
It was really
bro.
weird.
That's crazy, bro.
Yeah.
And then I think Brooks ended up getting Avenged, right? Or was that later?
I think they had somebody else.
Oh, before Brooks, right.
Before
yeah,
Brooks,
yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, it's always weird things and timing.
And then there's nothing, and then everything on the same day.
Or how about the one where a friend of mine, I won't say his name, but he just told me a story. It's like this happens a lot too, where you get a call and it's like drop everything to do this gig, but they're just having a spat.
Right.
So it's like you go get, okay, I'm here. And then they're like, well, we made up, and we're bringing our guy back. It's like you've dropped everything. You said no to gigs. It's never anything on paper. They're not liable for anything.
Yeah.
They don't care about if they just ruin the rest of your year. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it's like, it's just one of those things where, you never know, man. So many things have to line up for this thing to actually be successful.
As an example, on that day when there was nothing for a while, and I got 2 calls the same day for 2 major, bands, neither of which worked out.
Right.
Because for Avenged, it was just not right. I wasn't, young enough, first of all, and didn't fit, didn't have the right tats, whatever, Yeah. But, and the same with Dream Theater. So, but then again, what do you do in a situation? I never felt, honestly, and maybe I'm lucky somehow that I can sort of compartmentalize and say, well, this is just work. This is, if it didn't work with the style or the age, whatever, it's not something that's not under my control.
Absolutely.
I'm quite stoic about those things. It's like I can only control the way I react to it. And, wasn't meant to happen. Didn't work for them. Great. Clearly didn't work for me. Cool. Let's move on.
Yeah.
But I know that other people are much more sensitive to rejection like that. And, I mean, what do you recommend to somebody like that?
Well, I was told by an old manager of mine that I had, and this is the best thing that I ever was imparted to me that I followed since that day, which was business has no emotion. So I think we get emotionally involved in these things, but for the other side, it's just business.
Yeah.
So we have to look at it as business. It's like, if it works, cool. If it doesn't, we got to move on to the next, because spending time and beating yourself up, it's like that's just never going to be beneficial for you.
Yeah.
That's gonna hurt you in the long run. If you can just say, like you said, you obviously know how to do it, which is like, okay, it didn't work out. That's business. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I have tours that happen where I can make some of the dates, I can't make them all, and it's just, it's like stuff is going to happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you have this thing where, oh man, and you just defeat yourself, like Anthony Davis does sometimes with the Lakers, you're not going to play as well.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like when he's in his mind and he's like, I'm the guy, he's dominant.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if something happens and it takes him out the game mentally, we don't get the production from
Right.
him. So it's the same way. We
Yeah.
can't allow these little things to like take us off of our path, because everybody has a path. We don't really know what that is sometimes.
Right.
And how many times now on the other side have we gotten things that didn't work out just to let something else work out?
Absolutely.
That happens too. You know what I'm saying? So, my dad said something to me a long time ago, which is, when you close your fist, you don't let anything out, but you don't let anything in. Right? And that's the thing. Sometimes we're ready to fight all the time, and sometimes that will eliminate things. You know, there's another thing that people do all the time. Some people call you and say, hey, I have this idea, or I need you for something, I got you in mind for something. Some people say, hey, man, what you got going on?
Right.
Never say what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Somebody did that to me at a big show. They said, hey, so-and-so wants you to come to the studio right now. I said, I got to take my kids to the doctor, whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't say, it's to play one of the biggest concerts in the world.
Right.
Groundbreaking technology.
Right.
And I was like, they called back and said, yeah, they just said they got another drummer. You didn't even tell me what it was for.
Yeah.
And that some people are direct, some people aren't.
Right.
So it really has to line up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When something is going to work out. I mean, everything we do in this business, man, is a blessing.
Oh, absolutely.
When you do a session, I think there's probably, 30, 40 people that have been involved with getting you your check, and, between the session and the record label and the union.
Yeah.
There's all these things that have to line up for us to ever make a dollar in this business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just a blessing. We can't beat ourselves up, bro.
Absolutely.
Can't do it.
That's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up. Just deal with it if it happens to you, and it's all business. And move on. Try to stay positive and focus on the people who support you and people who dig what you do.
Yeah. There you go.
There
That's
it is.
man.
All right. Well, guys.
Till next time.
Till next time.
TL Squared. I'm Trevor Lawrence Jr.
I'm Thomas Lang.
All right. See you next time.
See you next time.
Peace.
TL Squared. TL Squared.